We are back at overtime here at Old Favorite Friday, continuing the discussion on the Arrogant Bastard Ale. Now, this beer has been around for a long time, Joel. 1997 is when Stone Brewing first did Arrogant Bastard. It is now its own brand. It was spun off back in 2015. And many beers under this oak age and many different variations of it. But Arrogant Bastard is its own brand. I have not had one of these in a long time. It was suggested, I picked it up. And I have a lot of fond memories about this beer, but I want you to share your thoughts first.
Well, this was one of my gateway beers, probably back around 2009. And a lot of people refer to it as a strong ale, which you really can't legally put on a label, I guess. But it was one of those beers that was always pushed as the antithesis to everything people thought they knew beer to be, which was fizzy, light yellow lagers. Kind of cheaply produced, and this is this big, bitter, malty, sweet, hoppy, just higher alcohol. There's so much going on, and it's such a powerful beer, and it has stood the test of time. I mean, tastes just like it always has, if not better. You hold it up to the light, and
beautiful
I
color.
mean, it's like a sparkling ruby. You can't really see it on camera, but I mean, it is glowing to me.
Yeah, it's like brown with like a reddish hue to it, which is gorgeous. You know, the first time I had this beer, I was struck by the gargoyle, right?
Yep.
And the name Arrogant Bastard was something that just stood out on the shelf, right? So the first time I ever had it, I didn't know what to expect, and I thought that someone was playing a rib on me because I had this beer before I got into craft beer, and I tasted this big, bitter beer, and I said, well, this is a novelty, right? This is just something, this is not supposed to be good, this is supposed to be something that is just kind of tongue-in-cheek. Not understanding IPAs, not understanding hop bills, not knowing anything about that. I learned about that many, many years later. And it was one of those beers where I kind of explain it for people that don't get into these hoppier beers, or more bitter beers, I should say more, because this is a bitter beer, right? Is that you almost have to, it's like almost like whiskey. Like you have to get over the burn, or something like a peated whiskey like Lafroig or Lagavulin. You got to get through the peat and that overabundant, that really hit you over the head flavor to get the nuance underneath. And it takes drinking a beer like this over and over again and training your palate to look beyond the bitterness to get all that great malt flavor that is there underneath it.
Yeah, agreed 100%. This is something that is very bitter on the first few sips. And then the more you drink it, the more that malt starts kind of taking over your palate and smoothing things out. As you can see, it's lacing the glass beautifully here. Really, really terrific. I love what they've done with the minimalist can design. I mean, you've got the big gargoyle, but it's all just red and black, really clean. I mean, almost kind of feels like a horror movie Halloween beer. You know, we are in that season, so it feels appropriate. But it's terrific. I mean, it really is what I remember it to be. And I remember going to the store and getting 22-ounce bottles or whatever it was, and now we've got 16-ounce, 6-pack. So share with friends. I mean, it's good stuff, and bitter is such an acquired taste. You're right. It is one of those things you have to get past. And I think if you just stick with it and keep sipping it and maybe let it warm a little, you'll start enjoying more of that toffee, that redness, the malt. It's all so good.
Yeah, and this really opened my world up, in a lot of ways, and trying all the different beers from Stone when it was branded by Stone back in the day, and got into their IPAs. And I remember getting the anniversary beer, which was like a chocolate oatmeal stout years and years ago, and that was just a really cool thing to find a brand like that was doing this, that was so different than what everything else was out there, at least in my world. And in 1997, I didn't know that craft beer existed, and I think a lot of people didn't, right? The other thing I thought about when I first tried this beer and how bitter it was, is I remember those commercials. It was like Keystone or someone back in the day that had like bitter beer face. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's what they were talking about, this kind of thing. And it's interesting now, years later, that we've had this huge rise in IBU's bitterness, right? Just we wanted bitterness for like 10 years. And then all the IPAs now, no bitterness, all hop flavor, fruity, this, that, and the other. I find myself craving this. I find myself going, man, remember when beers were bitter?
Yes.
Remember when IPAs and hoppy beers gave you that kick? And that's what this is.
Yeah, I mean, it's not only the bitterness, it's also the clarity. I mean, this is such a throwback to me. So many beers were like this, and so many of them were great at the time, and it really is a classic.
And this beer, like you said, so many beers with some of these similar flavor profiles, but how many beers were this color, this malty and dark? We had India Brown Ales. Dogfish had made a nice India Brown Ale, but there's a reason, there's no real style to this. It's listed as a strong ale, but it really is its own entity. It was unique when it came out. There were some beers that were somewhat similar, but not that many. And to this day, it still kind of holds its own. It is its own brand, which is a really cool thing.
Yeah, I think back then, to the era we're kind of reminiscing to, I think red IPAs were pretty prevalent, Imperial Reds, that kind of thing. And it's all kind of faded away in a sense. There's several people out there still doing it, but, for them to maintain this the entire time and still be rebranding it and spinning it off into its own thing and kind of untethering itself from the Stone label, they've really made it work and kept it going. It's impressive.
Yeah, it really is. Highly recommend, obviously, you go pick this beer up. Thank you for the person that suggested this beer for us to pick up, because we haven't tried it in a long time. And it's a really cool thing to revisit. Please poke around on the channel and find other conversations where I meet with Joel, our head brewer here at Barrel of Monks Brewing, or Ralph, and we talk about these beers and we talk about great classic beers that have been around for a long time, 1997, and still deserve the love and attention that we put on it. Cheers.
Cheers.